You're just the nanny, not their real grandma. Don't confuse the role." Those were the exact words my daughter Lauren said to me. And she said them with a straight face. In front of her friends. After I had spent nearly 7 years raising her children. 7 years. 7 years of early mornings with bottles and diapers. 7 years of school pickups, birthday cakes, late-night fevers, and first words that I still remember better than she does. And in the end, I was just a nanny. I wasn't prepared for the coldness in her voice. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration. Cold, calculated, and intentional. What makes a grandmother? Blood. Or love. I wiped their tears. I calmed their fears. When Lauren and her husband were too busy, it was me who stepped in. When the kids cried in the middle of the night, it was me who held them. But apparently to my daughter, love doesn't count. I remember that day vividly. It was a Sunday. They were hosting a small gathering for her husband's promotion. The house was pristine, the kids were dressed up, and I had just helped set up the food. I was placing cupcakes on the table when little Max, the youngest, tugged at my blouse and said sweetly, "Grandma, can you read me a story later?" And then Lauren turned, smiled at her friend, and said loud enough for the room to hear, "Oh, he calls her grandma sometimes. But she's really more like the nanny." My heart stopped. My face flushed. I looked at her, hoping it was a joke. Hoping she'd laugh and say, "I'm kidding. She's the best grandma ever." But she didn't. She walked away like it was nothing. I stood there, holding that tray of cupcakes, wondering where I had gone wrong. Wondering how my daughter, the same baby I once swaddled in my arms, who used to scream, "Mommy," when scared of thunder, had turned into this cold stranger who saw me as nothing more than a hired hand. No paycheck, no title, no respect, just invisible. That night, I sat alone in the guest room. I wasn't even given a real bedroom anymore, just a fold-out cot next to the laundry machines. I stared at the family photos on the wall outside, and noticed something odd. None of them had me in them. Not one. Even the pictures from birthdays I planned, cakes I baked, cropped out, forgotten. In that moment, I realized something painful. I had poured my love into a family that no longer saw me. And maybe they never did. But here's what they didn't expect. They didn't expect that I would walk away. They didn't expect I had something to say. They didn't expect the nanny to have a voice or a plan. Because while they erased me from their lives, they forgot something important. I remember everything. Every sacrifice, every bill I covered when they were in debt. Every emergency pickup. Every night I stayed up holding a crying child while they partied or traveled. And what they did next, what Lauren said next, would push me beyond my limits. Because betrayal is one thing. But betrayal from your own child, that cuts the deepest. And when you silence a mother long enough, she learns to speak in ways you never expected. Lauren wasn't always like this. She was my miracle baby, born after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages and years of trying. When I held her for the first time, I remember thinking, "This is it. This is the one I've been waiting for." Her little fingers curled around mine like they were made to fit there. She had these wide, curious eyes that seemed to know everything and trust me completely. Her father left when she was 5. He didn't even look back. I worked double shifts at the diner, cleaned houses on the weekends, anything to keep us afloat. There were nights I'd come home so tired I couldn't feel my legs, but Lauren would be waiting by the door, blanket in hand, just to sit on my lap and fall asleep in my arms. She was my world. I gave her everything. She didn't grow up with luxury, but she never went hungry. I bought her second-hand books, cooked warm meals every day, and made sure her birthdays were special, even if it meant skipping lunch for a week so I could afford a small gift. Lauren was bright, ambitious, and so proud of her independence. When she got a full-ride scholarship to college, I nearly collapsed from joy. I remember packing up her little dorm with trembling hands, trying not to cry. I told her, "Fly as far as you need to, but always know where home is." She promised she would never forget. Years passed, and she became a teacher. Then married David, a quiet, methodical man from an upper-middle-class family. I didn't mind him at first. He was polite, reserved, maybe a little too focused on appearances, but I thought if he made her happy, then that was enough. When they had their first child, Madison, things changed. Lauren called one night after a complicated delivery. She was exhausted, anxious, unsure of what to do. I dropped everything and moved in the next day. That was supposed to be temporary. But then came Max. Then came the long nights, the postpartum stress, the chaos of 2 careers and 2 toddlers. I told her I'd stay, just until things settle. They never really did. I raised Madison and Max in every way a mother would. I was the one who potty trained them, who made their school lunches, who sat through school plays and doctor appointments. Lauren and David were busy, always busy, and I told myself I didn't mind. I was doing it for the kids. And oh, how I adored them. Madison loved music. She'd sing to me while I cooked, turning spoons into microphones. Max was quieter, sensitive, and he followed me everywhere, even to the garden or laundry room. "You're my best friend, Grandma," he said once, with his tiny arms around my neck. Those were the moments that made the sacrifices feel worth it. I gave up everything. My own small apartment, my privacy, even my part-time job. I was never paid for what I did. Never asked for anything. I didn't need thanks, I thought. Love was enough. At least, I thought it would be. Over time, things began to shift in subtle ways. Lauren stopped asking how I was doing. I was no longer part of decisions. When they remodeled the house, I was moved into the laundry room. No one even asked. Sometimes I'd catch David giving me these disapproving glances, especially if the kids got too attached. One night I overheard him say, "They're starting to confuse her with their mother." Lauren didn't defend me. And slowly, she stopped introducing me to her friends as Mom or Grandma. I became our helper, or worse, not mentioned at all. I dismissed it as stress, the pressures of parenting. I told myself, they still love me. They're just overwhelmed. But the signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them. They took, and I gave. Because that's what mothers do. We don't keep score. We don't calculate the cost. Until one day, the debt becomes too big to ignore. Until the ones you love the most turn their backs on you. Until the daughter you raised, the baby you sacrificed everything for, looks you in the eye and tells you, "You're not family." And in that moment, something inside you shatters. But something else starts to rise. It all started with a birthday party. Madison was turning 10. Double digits, a milestone. I'd started planning months in advance. Hand-making decorations, collecting photos for a slideshow, even baking sample cakes to find the perfect one. Had always been me doing those things. Lauren and David were usually too busy or too tired, and I never minded. That year, Madison had asked for a backyard tea party, just like we used to pretend play. "With little sandwiches and matching hats," she said, giggling. So I went all out. I sewed floral bunting, made tiny cookies, even borrowed porcelain tea sets from a neighbor. On the morning of her party, I was in the kitchen by 5 a.m., kneading dough and preparing little name cards for each child. But then, as the guests began arriving, I noticed something strange. No one greeted me. The other parents smiled politely but looked confused when I tried to usher them in. Some even asked, "Are you the event planner?" I laughed it off. Maybe Lauren had just forgotten to introduce me. Then I saw the sign at the front gate. Hosted by Lauren and David, tea with Madison. No mention of me. Not even a small acknowledgement. My stomach dropped, but I kept working, smiling, serving food like everything was fine. Then I heard the sentence that cracked everything open. A mother asked Lauren, "Wow, this is so beautiful. Did you plan it all yourself?" And without missing a beat, my daughter said, "Oh, we hired someone. Just a nanny who helps with the kids sometimes." Nanny. That's what I was to her. After 10 years of diapers, school drop-offs, lullabies, and sick nights, I was just a nanny who helps. I stood there, frozen, icing bag in my hand, barely breathing. Madison looked over and waved. "Grandma." Come sit with me. Her voice was bright, pure, loving. But Lauren intercepted. She leaned down and said, "Not now, honey. Let's keep this table for your friends." The table I had set. The table I had decorated. I backed away slowly into the kitchen, where I stood alone among crumbs and silence, listening to laughter I was no longer part of. That night, after the guests left, I tried to speak up. I asked Lauren why she said what she did. Why she introduced me like that. I was calm, not accusing, just confused. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Mom, please don't make this about you," she said. "It was just easier that way. You know how people are. They don't get our situation." "Our situation," I repeated, blinking. She sighed and finally looked at me. "You live in our house. You help with the kids. You don't pay rent. What else would people think? I mean, you're not really their grandma. Not like David's mom is." I stared at her, heart pounding. "Not really their grandma," I whispered. "Lauren, I raised them." She rolled her eyes. "Yeah, you help. And we're grateful. But there's a line, Mom. Sometimes you act like they're yours. And honestly, it's confusing for them." Confusing. My love. My sacrifices were confusing. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed in my little laundry room turned bedroom, staring at the photos I had taped to the wall. Madison holding my hand at the zoo, Max curled up next to me on Christmas Eve. The next morning things got worse. David came in while I was making breakfast. He cleared his throat and said, "Lauren and I talked. We think it's time to restructure some things. Boundaries, you know." Turned slowly. "Boundaries." He nodded. "It's not healthy for the kids to rely on you so much. You're not a parent. You're not even on legal documents. We'll be hiring a part-time nanny going forward so you can rest." I laughed bitterly. "So I can rest? After 10 years? He gave me a tight smile. "You've done your part. But it's time we move into the next chapter as a nuclear family." That was when Lauren came down the stairs, avoiding my eyes. She didn't say a word. Just sipped her coffee. And that's when I realized they wanted me out. Not with shouting. Not with anger. But quietly. Neatly. Like brushing crumbs off the table. Later that week I found my things packed in boxes. My name was no longer on the school emergency contact list. Madison and Max weren't told anything. Just that Grandma was taking a break. Madison cried when I hugged her goodbye. "But you live here," she said. "You always live here." I kissed her forehead and told her I'd be back. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't coming back. And neither was the woman who had allowed herself to be treated like a ghost. I moved into a small rental above a florist shop 2 towns over. It wasn't much. Just 1 room, a tiny kitchen, and a creaky twin bed. But for the first time in years it was quiet. Not the silence of being ignored like I felt in that house. No, this was peaceful silence. Space to think. To breathe. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had lived for those kids. For their routines. Their lunches, their scraped knees, their bedtime stories. Without them, I felt like a ghost drifting through the days. But then something strange happened. I began sleeping through the night. I started going on morning walks. I found a small church group that met every Thursday for tea and book discussions. Mostly women my age, many of them grandmothers. I didn't tell them everything at first. Just that I had stepped back from helping raise my grandkids. One woman, Irene, looked at me kindly and said, "Sometimes stepping back lets people see what they're about to lose." I didn't reply, but her words clung to me. Around that time I also found a job. It wasn't glamorous. Just part-time, assisting at the florist downstairs. But the owner, Kelly, was warm and funny, and she let me bring home leftover blooms every Friday. I started filling my tiny apartment with color. Tulips by the window. Hydrangeas by the bed. I even began journaling again, something I hadn't done since Lauren was a teenager. Page after page of thoughts, memories, regrets. Some days I wrote letters to Madison and Max that I never sent. I told them about the birds nesting outside my window, about how much I missed brushing their hair, about how love didn't stop, not even when you're pushed away. I didn't reach out to Lauren. Not because I didn't miss her. I did fiercely, but because I realized something important. For too long, I had been available at every hour, forgiving every slight, swallowing every insult, always giving, never asking. And they had learned to expect that version of me. Always there, always silent. But now I was becoming someone new. One day, while sorting old photos, I came across one of me and Lauren at a beach when she was 8. I was kneeling beside her, adjusting her sun hat. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. She looked so much like Madison. I stared at that photo for a long time. I thought about how I raised Lauren alone after her father left. How I worked double shifts and skipped meals so she could eat. How I never once made her feel like she owed me for any of it. Maybe that had been my mistake. I loved without limits, without asking for respect in return. And she had learned to love me the same way, without effort, without depth. Hurt. But it also gave me clarity. So I started planning, not revenge, not punishment, but something more powerful. A quiet life built on self-respect. A life where I was no one's afterthought. I took a class at the community center on child psychology, something I'd always been curious about. I started offering part-time babysitting for other families through the church. And word spread fast. Soon I was Miss Eleanor, the beloved local caregiver who brought homemade banana bread and knew every child's favorite story by heart. Felt valued. But most of all I felt free. And while I didn't reach out to Lauren, I didn't disappear either. On Madison's birthday, I mailed a small box with a handmade scrapbook of our favorite tea parties. I didn't include a return address, just a note in curly handwriting. For every moment we shared, I will always be your grandma. A week later, I received a thank you card in return. Madison's handwriting was unmistakable, uneven but careful. It said, "I miss you. Mommy says you're busy now. Can I come see your flowers one day?" I cried for an hour. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I knew this wasn't the time for quick fixes or open doors. This was the time to keep building myself, so that when or if they truly saw me again, it would be with new eyes. Eyes that finally recognized not a nanny, not a helper, but a woman who gave everything, and finally chose to give to herself. 6 months passed. 6 months without phone calls from Lauren. Without little feet running down the hallway. Without Max's sleepy hugs or Madison's sticky kisses on my cheek. But also 6 months of peace. Of color blooming back into my life. Of coffee cups that stayed hot. And mornings where I didn't brace myself for another insult disguised as gratitude. Then, one rainy afternoon, as I was arranging lilies for a wedding order, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. But seconds later it rang again. This time curiosity got the better of me. I wiped my hands, picked up. "Mom." It was Lauren. Her voice, hesitant, small. I didn't know if you'd pick up." I didn't speak. I didn't know what to say. My heart thudded in my chest. She continued. It's about Madison." And just like that, everything else fell away. Apparently, Madison had been having nightmares. Refusing to go to school. Acting out. A therapist finally got her to open up. "She keeps asking for you," Lauren said, voice cracking. "She says she misses her real grandma. She cried when I said we couldn't visit." I let the silence stretch. "I shouldn't have said what I said, Mom," Lauren added. "About you being the nanny. I was stressed. I was wrong." No, I cut in softly, my voice steady. "You weren't just stressed, Lauren. You were cruel. And you meant it." She was silent on the other end. Took a breath. "I gave everything to that home. I raised your children like they were my own. And when you were tired of me, you discarded me like help you didn't want to tip." "I know," she whispered. "I was awful. I didn't argue." Then she said, "I want to fix this. Madison wants to see you. Max too. They miss you terribly." Please, can we come visit? Pause. I wanted to say yes. My heart screamed yes. But my spirit, the part that had finally learned how to protect itself, held back. So I said, you can bring the kids this Saturday. You can stay for an hour. But Lauren. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. This isn't just a visit. It's the beginning of something new. And it won't look like the past. I won't be your backup, your stand-in, or your free help. I'm Madison and Max's grandmother. Not your employee. There was a long pause. Then, understood. Saturday arrived. I wore my best dress. I baked cinnamon rolls, Max's favorite. I placed a small bouquet on the table, wildflowers in pastel tones, and lit the cinnamon candle Madison used to love. When they arrived, Madison was the first out of the car. She ran to me, threw her little arms around my waist, sobbing, "Grandma, I thought you didn't love me anymore." "Oh, sweet pea," I whispered, holding her close. "There's not a day I stopped." Max followed, quieter, older, but when I touched his cheek, he leaned into it, his eyes misting. Lauren stood behind them, awkward, watching. I invited them in, but I kept my distance. For the hour I focused on the children. We read books, shared roles, and laughed. The kind of belly laughs I hadn't felt in months. Lauren mostly sat in silence, her eyes scanning the walls, maybe noticing the certificates I had earned from my child psychology course, the photo of me with Irene's grandkids, the small shelf of thank you cards from families in the church. I saw something shift in her eyes. She was used to me being tucked into the background. Forgotten. Always available. But now, had a life. A warm, full, rich life that had nothing to do with her. When the hour was up, the kids clung to me. Lauren asked gently if they could come again. Smiled. "Let's take it slow." She nodded. And for the first time in years, she looked at me not with entitlement but respect. That was my quiet revenge. Not slamming doors or shouting speeches, but showing her, through action, that I wasn't broken, waiting, or desperate. I had healed. And now she had to come to me on my terms. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it. Months passed. The visits became regular but not routine. They came when invited, not when demanded. The kids began calling me more often. Little video chats filled with stories about school, missing teeth, and new friends. And Lauren? Well, she changed. Not overnight. Not with some teary apology or dramatic gesture. But in the small ways that told me she was trying. She started helping clean up after our visits. Bringing small things like flowers from the kids or photos they'd drawn. She started listening, really listening when I spoke. But I kept my boundaries. I no longer offered to babysit at the last minute. I no longer accepted being the default when she and Brian needed to escape the chaos. Because I'd learned. Love without limits too often turns into love without respect. And I wasn't going back there. One Sunday afternoon, after the kids had run off to play, Lauren and I sat on the porch with our tea. The late summer sun filtered through the trees. The wind carried the scent of rosemary from my herb garden. "I used to think I was doing you a favor," Lauren said suddenly, her voice quiet. "Letting you be part of the kids' lives. Giving you a purpose." I didn't interrupt. "But you had a purpose long before that," she continued. "And I took you for granted. I didn't understand how much of your life you gave for mine. Not until I tried doing it without you." She looked over at me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, humility. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she added. "But I hope we can build something better." And in that moment I believed her. Because I wasn't the same woman I used to be either. Once I believed that being needed was the highest form of love. Now I knew better. Being needed can lead to being used. But being valued, being seen, respected, appreciated, that's love worth keeping. The truth is, I didn't raise my daughter to be cruel. Life, stress, maybe even entitlement twisted something in her. But it didn't have to end that way. People change. Sometimes too late. Sometimes just in time. And sometimes not at all. But I changed too. And that's the part of this story I hope you hold on to. Because maybe you're watching this with a heavy heart, wondering if the love you gave was a waste. If the silence in your phone means you don't matter anymore. If the people you once raised have forgotten what you gave up for them. I know that pain. But here's the truth. The love you gave was never wasted. It shaped them, carried them, even if they don't say thank you, even if they shut you out. And you still have worth. You still have time. You still have chapters left to write, with or without them. I found peace not by getting my old life back, but by building a new one. One where I am no longer just the grandmother, the helper, the one who says yes even when I'm breaking. I am a woman who loves, but also a woman who chooses who to give that love to. And today I choose to love myself first. Madison once asked me, "Grandma, why did you stop coming?" I told her, "Because sometimes even grandma needs time to heal." She nodded like she understood. Maybe one day she really will. So if no one's told you lately, you're not just a babysitter. You are not just free help. You are not just background noise in your children's lives. You are a story worth telling. And this is not the end of your story.